Okay, welcome to the genome. Okay, so today we're just going to talk about chapters 9 and 10. So this is pretty darn good because now we're going to go ahead and meet the genome. The genome itself is pretty darn important, and this is where transcription comes into. DNA, as I already mentioned, is the only reason why proteins are created, and it's the only reason why they know what to do. They're not alive, just you know. Now, proteins actually make the cell, and the cell makes protein, and so this seems pretty circular, but there's actually the one thing that's like powers all this, the DNA. It's the instructions that we mentioned, and it's technically the world's first computer. That when life started forming, it actually already created a computer. We just made it digital. The genome itself is just a bunch of DNA twisted together, and to us it looks sometimes like X's, but if you like, it's like created by long strands, thin strands, and sometimes we can actually see them with the naked eye. However, most of the time we don't, and we're actually going to need some ribosomes for that. However, genomes themselves are pretty useless by themselves, and to actually create DNA and RNA for actual usable instructions, we need transcription. Transcription itself is pretty important, as without transcription, RNA wouldn't even be created. So it turns the ACTG into ACUG, and using all that, mRNA is just a message with a code, and with all that, we can actually do loads of things. One of them being the fact that you can use these transcribed genomes to go ahead and create proteins and other items that we need, like an immune system response attack. Then we're just going to need to use it so we can go ahead and do lots of other things. Like, I don't know, make blood cells or T blood cells or white blood cells. The chapter 10, gene regulation. Now, of course, genes need to be regulated. Now, of course, if they're not that regulated, then lots of things actually will happen. Because if you just keep on transcribing DNA without any stop, then you're probably going to get into some random trouble. And if you have too many proteins, the cell is out of equilibrium, which means cell death. And random proteins of like flying around the whole cell, and then we wouldn't have any equilibrium at all. So we need regulation. However, it has to be really strict because cells are necessarily complex. And if it wasn't that complex, we would be way more simpler here. We wouldn't have this complex mind and lots of other things too. Now, if you just suddenly tell them to not be that complicated and be less regulatory, and somehow for some reason they do listen, then you'll probably just turn into a bunch of mud, like a puddle. And somehow, there's also a downside to cells, though. They all start out in the bones as stem cells, and stem cells can choose to become anything else. Any cell. They can turn into a liver cell, they can turn into like a nerve cell, but in 2019, no one has actually been able to actually know how to reverse a cell, like turn a liver cell back into a stem cell, or a neuron back into a stem cell. However, new research in the 2020s actually shown that there's a process that we can use to actually reverse fully grown cells back into their native states, like the stem cells. So we can actually use that to create new neurons. Like we can use that to recreate neurons. If we can get someone to donate liver, we can somehow get all those stem cells turned into neurons, and someone needs a little brain transplant, we can actually turn those stem cells and turn them into adapt them to turn into neurons that are adapted to be for the right specific conditions for that person who needs the brain cells, aka neurons, which is pretty darn useful, and we can actually use all this to go ahead and new advances in history and medical science. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully you guys already enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys did, and if this is revolutionary to you guys, then I highly suggest you become a doctor or a biologist, or just go ahead and be like me, make YouTube videos and that no one watches. But so hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, shine out, and always remember to wear a helmet.